Well, a few days ago now, on October the 14th, I was ordained as a deacon in the Church of Confessing Anglicans. It was a wonderful occasion, and I thank God so much for giving me this calling, for taking me through that process, and I really cannot wait to serve God, to glorify Jesus Christ, and to serve God's people, and to proclaim the gospel to the world as a deacon. And I ask that you do pray for me, that God will bless me and will ensure that my ministry can be of any use to people, because obviously without the Holy Spirit's help, I cannot do anything good really for in God's name. So I ask for your prayers in that regard. And I think before I explain a little bit about what the future is probably going to hold for me and what's ahead in terms of my ministry, I think I should take this opportunity to just explain what's been going on the past few years that I've had this YouTube channel in terms of church membership, because I haven't really explained that in detail before. So in 2016, my wife and I both converted to Anglicanism, and we started attending a church in the mainstream Anglican Church, an Anglican Communion parish, and we really enjoyed it there. It was a very high church, and I started to feel a call to ministry around about 2019. And the how this sort of came about was I ended up preaching at our parish every month, and my priest at the time identified a call to ministry and said that he thought I was gifted to be ordained as a priest. He then retired, and then our new priest came in, and he was even more enthusiastic and encouraging, and identified that call to ministry, and encouraged me to pursue that call. So I ended up establishing a young adults Bible study, which I still lead every week, and certainly was thrust into a lot of ministry opportunities with that group, being something of a young adults pastor there. And I just had that passion for teaching doctrine, that passion for theology, for proclaiming the gospel, and a passion for leading worship too. I love liturgy. I love Sunday worship. Sunday worship is my favorite time of the week. And I've always had a love for things like leading weddings or even leading funerals, or just those sorts of gatherings. Liturgical gatherings have always been something I've really appreciated, and I've always felt that I would like to lead those. So I guess my life sort of just naturally led to that sense of calling. Sorry, you'll have to excuse the construction going on outside. This is the only time I'm going to be able to make this video for a little while, so I've kind of got to do it now despite the builders right outside. So in 2020, I entered the discernment process in the Auckland diocese of the mainstream Anglican Church in New Zealand. And by this point, the Church of Confessing Anglicans had already been established in New Zealand. We'll get onto that later. And at this time, I was still Anglo-Catholic. I'd already established my YouTube channel, feeling a call to talk about Anglicanism and sort of spread awareness about Anglican theology in the online space. But I was very naive at this time, very naive, and you can sort of see that attitude reflected in some of our old Theology Over Drinks videos. This sort of youthful sense of we're going to retake the mainstream church, we're going to reconquer it. And it is naive, because if you actually talk to guys, to clergymen who are, they might be in their 60s or 50s, and they've been fighting this fighting against liberalism, against heresy, against progressivism for decades, for, in some cases longer than I've even been alive. And, here we are saying, oh, we're going to retake it. It's very out of touch. People have already been fighting this for a long time in the mainstream Anglican Church in New Zealand, and they know that enough's enough. It's too late. It's too late. It's time to do something else. But anyway, I hadn't really met any clergy who'd really been in the trenches in the mainstream Anglican Church. My priest at the time was Orthodox, but he wasn't someone who'd actually been out there in the battle, so to speak, fighting against the liberal heretics who've sort of occupied the church. And so here I was thinking, I'm going to retake it. I'll get ordained. I'll plant an Orthodox parish, and we'll go from there. Well, so I got into this discernment process 2020, and I'd already known that the mainstream church was liberal, but I guess I didn't realize just quite how liberal it was. So in my discernment process, the main two people who were sort of interviewing me was one person was a layman who's an openly gay man, and he's one of the leading voices in the entire mainstream Anglican Church in New Zealand for things like gay marriage and gay ordination and that sort of thing. So there was him, right? So pretty much the poster child for the gay movement in the Anglican Church in New Zealand, and a layman. And then the other person was also a female priest who's just about one of the most progressive priests in the Auckland diocese. I'm not going to name these people, by the way, of course. But anyway, so they're leading the process, and as you can imagine, it wasn't going so well, and they were grilling me throughout the process on my YouTube channel, of all things. Why do you have a YouTube channel? Why are you making videos about this? Don't you think that the Anglican perspective should be open to all kinds of different views, and blah, 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 blah. People just finding it bizarre, basically, that I even care about doctrine at all, or even know what the word doctrine means. Grilling me on all kinds of things, women's ordination, pretty much every pastoral scenario I got given in interviews and in the discernment weekend, where they sort of give you a pastoral scenario and then you have to give a presentation about how you'd respond to it. They were all to do with things like, a gay couple comes in, some people in the church don't like them. How do you resolve that? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Needless to say, didn't get approved for ordination. Funny enough, though, I wasn't given a no. My Bishop of Auckland, said he would like to continue this process with me, because he says that it's in his view it's clear that I am gifted for ministry and called for it, but he says he has concerns about my rigidity in my theology. And then in what was one of the most bizarre moments of my entire life, if not the most bizarre moment of my life, one of the people who interviewed me in my discernment process, the bishop told me to meet with her again to sort of debrief about why it was that they felt that I wasn't yet ready for ministry, or why they still wanted to work with me on this discernment process, and to give advice about how I can improve down the line so that I can eventually be ordained. So we had that meeting, and I really am not making this up. I'm not going to tell you who the person was. I am not making this up. This really is what she said to me. She said, first of all, one of their concerns of me is that, quote, my perspective on life is too rigidly Christian. So I want to be ordained as a priest, a Christian priest in the church. And their concern is that my perspective on life is too rigidly Christian. Well, I, of course, found that very strange. And she elaborated more on how I can improve in that department. That was basically what the whole meeting was about. And she encouraged me to explore other faiths, Hinduism, see the truths of those faiths and be more open to other possibilities. She suggested I read an autobiography of a gay man to understand what it might be like to be gay. To seek out gay friends to understand their perspective. And then this is the strangest one. This issue had never come up before. So she's listing off things. She's saying explore Hinduism, read a book about homosexuality. And then she says, you should read Lolita to understand what it's like to be attracted to children. She actually said that to me. And I'd been polite so far at that interview, but I stopped being polite at that point. And walking out of her office, I called up my wife on the phone, and I said, honey, we've got to get out of here. we've got to get out of this church. This basically isn't a church anymore. This is the person the bishop told me to meet with, and this is what we're hearing. It's gone. Rome has fallen. The Canaanites have taken over the promised land, and it's time to get out. We'd already been thinking about that for a while, about joining the Church of Confessing Anglicans, but we were still sort of naive and thought, well, we don't want to get onto the lifeboats. It's not a lifeboat situation. It's a all hands on deck situation, that sort of thing. And it's just naive. And since then, I've met with many clergymen, as I mentioned earlier, who have been in the trenches for decades. And just for me in my 20s to sort of have no idea about who the major players in the church are and to think that I'm going to take it over is just absolute nonsense. But thankfully, those clergymen were gracious and sort of quietly smiled to themselves about youthful idealism, I suppose. And since then, I've heard stories about the sheer levels of heresy in the church, about the vast amount of clergy who basically are atheists and don't even believe in any sort of Christian doctrine whatsoever. The large amount of clergymen who've been embroiled in all kinds of sex scandals, sleeping with multiple parishioners, procuring abortions for their mistresses, and we're not taking that back. Maybe decades from now, when they're all dead and 6 feet under, we can come back. But until then, it's time to look to GAFCON, of course, which I'd already been following very closely. And, basically in 2019, GAFCON established in New Zealand the Church of Confessing Anglicans of Aotearoa, New Zealand. We formed the sort of straw that broke the camel's back for us was that in a general synod, it was approved that there can be same-sex blessings for people in same-sex relationships, and that people openly in those relationships can be ordained to all ranks of clergy. So that was the final straw, really. So we call it the CCA. The CCA was established. Our Bishop J, was consecrated by Foley Beach, who many of you might know. He's the primate of the ACNA. I believe the Archbishop of Rwanda was there, the Archbishop of Sydney was there, and a few other prelates were there. So we're very much a GAFCON established church. We're not a bunch of hicks who have no connection to anything out in the woods somewhere. We're part of the wider GAFCON movement. We're still small at the moment. We've only got 18 parishes in the CCA, but some of them are fairly large with multiple hundreds of members. And so we'd already knew about that, but then we realized, hey, look, we've got to get out of the mainstream church and join the CCA. So we did that, and I joined the CCA, my wife and I, and some of our friends as well who'd been at our church with us. We joined there in mid-2021, I believe. If I realize later on that I've got these dates wrong, I guess I'll put some corrections in the comments, but I believe that's all correct. And we joined a church at the time called Auckland Anglican Mission. The priest in charge there is a wonderful man of God, Reverend Malcolm Falloon, who's been in this fight for so long, and he's been such an encouragement to me. And we joined there. It's definitely wasn't as high church as our old parish, but we were really encouraged by the wonderful depth of teaching there and the wonderful sense of community at this church, because everyone in the congregation has left their congregations to form this one. And it was just this wonderful community that's carried me through this time in my life and been such an encouragement. And then around that time, of course, as well, I moved away from Anglo-Catholicism and into becoming Reformed. I made a video about that at the time. So that video was made at this time of leaving the mainstream church, joining the CCA and that sort of thing. So it was a real time of shifting for me, seeing the faults of Anglo-Catholicism, because a big part of Anglo-Catholicism for me was its ecclesiology of we need to be a united communion under the Archbishop of Canterbury. To split from that could be schismatic, so on and so forth. And just seeing the faults of that. and thinking that if you have an apostolic succession of bishops, everything's going to be hunky-dory, when of course it's not at all. The bishops of the mainstream Anglican Church in New Zealand, not only are they actively poisoning the church with their heresy, they're actually even poisoning the world. The church is not following the world's liberalism and heresy. The church is actually leading it. They're actually on the front line of things like feminism, of things like LGBT acceptance, and all those sorts of issues. The church is actually at the forefront of it rather than following along. And so, yeah, just because you've got bishops in a line of succession, it doesn't mean much in the grand scheme of things. And seeing Anglo-Catholic sort of spirituality sort of starting to fail me, synergism failing me pastorally. So moving into Reformed and reading guys like Calvin and being convinced of their views. So at Auckland Anglican Mission, and I've been there ever since. Now that church has now renamed itself. We've renamed ourselves Church of the Ascension, much nicer name. Still under Reverend Malcolm there as our priest in charge. And then in February of this year, I, with the encouragement of Reverend Malcolm and with the encouragement of the young adults group and various other people from the Church of the Ascension congregation, we established an evening service for Church of the Ascension that was very traditional. So we wear robes. We follow the 1662 Book of Common Prayer. We do evensong and the litany. And every month we do Holy Communion, because we already do Holy Communion every week in the morning service. So I do believe in weekly communion, but for an evening service, I think it's okay to do it monthly. And all of my recent sermons have been from that evening service. So that was wonderful getting that opportunity to essentially lead a small congregation has been great. We've got a congregation of about 10 people there. Or 10 people who we can sort of rely on 10 each Sunday, but there's about 15 people who come in general who are associated with it. And now that I'm ordained and that sort of thing, we're now looking to look into planting that as a separate church. We've called ourselves St. Timothy's Anglican Church, and linked below is the Facebook page for that. And I'd ask you to check it out, give it a like, give it a follow, just to support that church plant that we're doing. It's still under Church of the Ascension, and I'm a curate under my priest in charge, Reverend Malcolm. But we're looking to have that be a somewhat of a distinct identity as well, and plant that as a church. And yeah, to have that traditional expression of Anglicanism in Auckland, which is desperately needed, really, because I can't think of any parishes in Auckland. This is New Zealand's largest city, over 1 million people, who follow the 1662 Book of Common Prayer, or any Anglican church in the country, really, that would do the litany every week. So I think it's important to bring that stuff back. So I wanted to explain that in part because my sermon videos, if you look at them, it looks like I've been jumping around from church to church for a while, but that's actually not the case. There's only been one switch for me, which happened in 2021. So my older sermons, which is in this beautiful old building, that's from my first parish in the mainstream Anglican Church. And then I start preaching, not wearing robes or anything, at a more modern-looking church. That's Church of the Ascension. There's a couple of different backgrounds. That's just because sometimes we move the orientation of our pews and stuff around. So that's all that. And of course, the recent ones where I've been wearing a surplice has been from St. Timothy's, which is the daughter congregation of Church of the Ascension. So there's just been that one switch that happened a couple of years ago, moving into the CCA. And I'm so glad that God called me and my family and my friends out of that church, because it really was spiritually toxic to us. And it was just, I'm so glad that God shattered my pride and naivety and brought us into the CCA, because it's just been so wonderful there. The clergy, our Bishop Jay, it's just been so encouraging and so supportive and so godly and wise, and really equipping me for what's ahead. So then, that's kind of just the background. In terms of what's ahead in the future, we're going to be, as I said, planting St. Timothy's, And our idea of St. Timothy's is we're going to be thoroughly orthodox in doctrine. Our sermons are always going to be looking to preach the gospel, have the real sense of the law and gospel distinction. I've been trying to have that in my sermons. We're confessional. So at all of our services, we will read one of the articles of religion. We're just going to keep going through it in a rotation. A couple of times I've read one of the homilies in the place of my sermon. Always going to follow the 1662 Book of Common Prayer. And we have a biblical view, of course, of family and sexuality, opposing the LGBT agenda, of course, but also believing in gendered piety. We're quite open about that, about how men and women have different roles in the church and at home. So, and we're just looking to stand firm in the faith and stand firm for the scriptures as interpreted by the Anglican formularies, and not make any compromises with modernism. We're not going to compromise with modernism in terms of our liturgy. We're not going to compromise with them in terms of even our singing style. We sing a cappella, no instrumentation, just the old classic hymns. We're not going to make compromises in our doctrine. We are going to stand firm and hold the line. And we see worship as warfare. This is part of why we chose St. Timothy to be our name. In Paul's letters to Timothy, in both of them, he says things like, wage the good warfare, fight the good fight, be a soldier for Jesus Christ. And Timothy's this young man, and most of our congregants are young men. And so we see Timothy and Paul's instructions to him as being quite relevant to our mission of wanting to fight the good fight and plant our flag here in Auckland, one of the most atheist, liberal, and promiscuous cities on the planet, to say, no, we're standing firm, actually, and we're not going anywhere, and we're not going to compromise with you on anything. We're not going to compromise with the demonic powers who've taken this country over, and we're not going to compromise with the idolaters who have taken this country over. So again, link below to the Facebook page for that, and my sermons to come will either be from that, or if I'm not wearing a surplice, it will be because I'm preaching at Church of the Ascension. So I just want to say I've already thanked the people in my life who've been supportive and encouraging and instructive for me in this time. But in terms of you watching here on YouTube, I just want to say people who are on YouTube, I want to thank for their encouragement and support in this time. My good friend Paul Facey, he's been so encouraging to me. His channel is The Other Paul, of course. I imagine most of you know him. And Father James Gadd, he's been an encouragement to me for a very, very long time now. And right when I first started my channel, him and I have been in touch with each other. So I really want to thank him. And I especially want to thank Reverend Brett Murphy. He's got a channel. I'm sure most of you subscribe to him. He's got a very popular YouTube channel, and he's been so supportive, so encouraging, and given me such wonderful and godly advice as I've been pursuing this call to ministry. So I really want to thank those three in particular for all the ways they've supported me. I encourage you, if you haven't already, to subscribe to their channels. I'll link those channels below. We're all Anglicans, and we all have the same mission in the end of the day, to stand firm in the scriptures and in the faith once and for all delivered to the saints, and to not make compromises with the world. So I ask you finally to pray for me, to pray for what's ahead. I know there'll be many challenges ahead of me, to pray that God will give me strength, that he will gift me, that I can bear fruit for his glory. And I thank you all for watching this video, for all your support and encouragement as well. There's been so many lovely comments and messages over the years as I've had this channel encourage me to continue pursuing this call, and to continue wanting to minister to the church and to serve Christ and proclaim his gospel. So thank you to all of you, and God bless you all.